Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam and today I have that rare thing for you, something that's not so popular on BookTube these days, and that is a book review. Now I know these videos don't get a whole lot of views, but I love watching book reviews myself. I want to make them every now and then when I read a book I think I have enough to say about. So I want to talk about this book, and today it is The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell, rapidly becoming one of my favourite authors of all time. This is the fifth book I've read by him. Before this, I'd read 4 and I enjoyed 3 of those 4 very much. One was a bit of a miss, not awful, but just nothing great. So that is today's plan, to talk about this book. So with much further ado, let's talk about The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. So what is The Bone Clocks about? Now that is a bloody good question. Sorry if you can hear the builders in the background. Apparently builders don't get a day off on Saturday. But anyway, excellent question. What is the book about? It's quite difficult to talk about the plot of this book for a number of reasons, which I'll go over presently. One is the structure of the story itself, the structure of the book. It's classic David Mitchell, where we get a bunch of different short stories. I guess you'd probably call them novellas or novelettas or whatever, because they're like, I don't know, 60, 70 pages each from different characters and their points of view. Now, I could obviously talk about the individual stories themselves, but they do all eventually kind of link together in subtle to not so subtle ways throughout the book. And there's also kind of a grander tale that surrounds these shorter stories. And I think it's best to discover that grander tale yourself rather than me telling you, because it is done in a really interesting and fun way. So yeah, it's quite difficult to talk about it because we have these different POVs that have their own little story and this grander story around it, which is just best to find out for yourself. But the POVs we get are those such as a disillusioned teenager, a know-it-all Oxford student, a war journalist, an author in the autumn of his career, a psychiatrist, and an old lady in future Ireland. Now, as I said, there are links between the stories, and this book spans a time frame of around 60 years. So we have a long time to go through in this book, and we go through it chronologically through those short stories throughout the book. And what links them are a couple of key things, such as returning characters, key big characters that have big parts to play within the whole wider story. And also there is a sci-fi fantasy element to this book. Now, what is that element? Again, I don't really want to spoil it for you because it's something that is interesting to kind of puzzle together as you go through these stories. But it has to do with kind of powers of the mind. This is why I find it hard to determine whether you should call this fantasy or sci-fi, because these kind of concepts have been used in sci-fi books before, but it feels more fantasy to me, and God knows what the hell magical realism really means. So it could be any of those or a blend of those if you like. But this sci-fi fantasy element really forms the grander tale around the smaller stories. And it's introduced in a really nice, interesting way, in my opinion. I enjoyed it. So through most of the stories, we're given kind of small hints of this. No real big explanations as to what's going on with this element, but you just get little snippets, usually towards the end of the story, as we kind of get their background, and then we see how this element might affect their lives or the people in their lives. Now, this is where I have one kind of criticism with the book, is because I really enjoyed this element being introduced really in small ways that we kind of have to puzzle together ourselves. But then one of the points of view that we get later in the book becomes quite full on with this element, this sci-fi fantasy element, and becomes very exposition heavy, kind of explaining a lot of the background. Not everything, because we still have some more story to go in which we find out more, but we suddenly get this barrage of information about this sci-fi fantasy element. And I just found myself missing the subtlety of the previous chapters, where it's just introduced in a small way Now, this is just something for me. You might enjoy this, especially for those who like kind of world building, exposition based books. I do like those kind of books sometimes as well, but it felt just slightly out of character with the rest of the book for me. So this kind of brings me quite nicely to a key strength of the book for me, which is the characters and the writing itself. So 90% of this book will not be for plot readers. It really isn't focused on a big plot or a fast-paced story or anything like that, which is another reason why it's quite difficult to tell you what the book is about, because it's not really about a thing, you know, it's about the people, the characters. So our different sections are heavily slice of life based, as we follow characters doing fairly normal stuff in their life, with that little sprinkling of the supernatural, as I said, usually towards the end of the section. And that section I criticized a little bit before, that is the one plot heavy section where things really kind of reach a zenith with this outer story that has been built up to this point. However, this is what makes the book shine for me particularly. The character work is just completely wonderful for me, with every character having an extremely strong character voice, and by the end of these sections, you feel like you know this person, you feel like you know this point of view, and I feel that Mitchell can do it better than many can do in a whole book or even a whole series. He can do this in a noveletta size section. So the character voice is just so strong in each one. Now, warning, you may not like these characters particularly. Some of them aren't particularly nice or like have a moral grayness about them, may not be the most likable people. Some of them are, in my opinion, but some of them aren't. But they are just written so believably that you just get sucked in to their little story and learning about them. And I tell you what, each one feels so distinct from each other. I feel like you could pick up the book and pick it up at random, you know, if you went back to it, and you would know immediately who is talking. And each one of them goes through their own personal journey and development as well. There's two particular characters I can think of who have such a wonderful journey throughout their story, and the prose matches their character as well, as you would expect, but it is just done absolutely brilliantly. Now, speaking of prose, we need to talk about the writing itself because it deserves mention, because in my opinion it was absolutely wonderful. Now, I've always admired Mitchell's writing, and this book was absolutely no different. His writing is just it's beautiful, it's thoughtful, but yet never goes into the overly lyrical or purpley prose kind of way, and it has a dash of modernity to it as well. So, you know, it's not trying to harken back to old prose. It is modern. It feels modern, but it is beautiful and just well written, well put together. It just, reading through it feels so smooth, and you know, you get these frequent glimpses of truly wonderful passages of beauty which may be a little bit more lyrical, you know, often using metaphors or similes or descriptions. It's just absolutely wonderful, but it's functional as well. And we also get these wonderful passages of philosophical thoughts that the characters go through, and they are just so in line with the character but have so much to say to the wider world and are extremely relevant to us. And finally, a final note on the writing and the prose is that he loves to incorporate geography. So he travels around the world quite a lot, and the points of view are from different places in the world, and he likes to add a lot of phrases and colloquialisms from the settings that the people are from into the prose itself. So that again just adds another level of, you know, genuineness. Is that a word? I'm not sure. And a lot of the book is set in the UK, so that makes it an absolute treat for me reading it, being able to read all these British phrases that I no longer hear anymore because I don't live there anymore. And just a little note, some people might find that a little bit difficult because of the colloquial phrases. You might have to look them up, but it's not that important, and I just think it adds a certain level of character. So blah blah blah, absolutely rambling. I really liked Mitchell's writing once again. So what about the themes in this book? Now, it being episodic in nature, the themes tend to be relevant to the stories themselves most of the time, but we do kind of have an overarching theme that goes with this wider story that surrounds these smaller sections, and that is kind of around the use of power. If you are given power, how do you use it? Is it for selfish reasons or benevolent reasons? But there are obviously other themes throughout the book, and you can find them in their separate stories, such as the difficulties of becoming an adult, you know, that transition from a teenager to an adult, the price of selfishness, finding someone who makes you think differently, the effects of changes on your reputation, if your career revolves around reputation, becoming disillusioned with your profession as well over time, and the weighing of bad deeds against greater outcomes, you know, whether it's okay to do something bad for a greater outcome, and also self-sacrificed for loved ones. So you can find plenty of thematic work in all of Mitchell's writing, and no less in The Bone Clocks. So trying to keep this relatively short for me, that's about all I have to say about The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell today. I really enjoyed this book. If you cannot tell, this was a great read for me. Again, this is not going to be for everybody, absolutely not. Plot-driven readers will probably bounce off of this. Lovers of characters and character voice and great prose will likely enjoy it. I do recommend giving David Mitchell a try, but maybe not starting with this one, maybe starting with Cloud Atlas. Speaking of Cloud Atlas, that is still my favourite Mitchell book. I'd probably put this at my third favourite after Cloud Atlas and Black Swan Green, but another wonderful book by David Mitchell, who, as I said, is rising up the ranks of my favourite authors. And yeah, maybe give this one a try if it sounds good for you. If you're a plot-based reader, don't read it. So that is all I have for you today. If you've made it this far into the video, I thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you've read this book or any Mitchell at all. If you're thinking about reading this book, let me know and have a conversation in the comments. If you're new to the channel, please think about subscribing and joining my journey and making me rich and famous one day in the future. Thank you very much. So that's it for now. I'll see you in another video soon. Goodbye.